Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent uh-oh experiences in business.
Learn what their uh-oh cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Hey, Kyle, welcome to our show. This is Kyle McDowell here. And Kyle, you are just like a sought after person. It's all about we. I know that. So we are very happy to have you a part of our show. So welcome to the show.
Hey, fellas, it's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to spread the message. I've been looking forward to this one. Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds really great. So one of the things we like to do to get started is something we call connections before content. So we want to ask you this question. Tell us something about you that is not on your resume. And boy, does this guy have a resume. So you're going to have to think really long and hard because you got a lot on here. So what is something about you that's not on your resume that you'd share with us?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. And it's actually, I don't have to go so far because I think the resume only tells half the story for most of us, especially in my case. Like so many of us, I set out to do a lot of big things in the corporate world. I wanted to have a huge impact. I wanted to lead big organizations. I wanted to find fulfillment. And if you look at the resume, you see this constant climb throughout the corporate world to the point where I was leading tens of thousands of employees before I exited in 2019. But what the resume doesn't show is the level of apathy that I managed to accumulate year after year, move after move, which is essentially what compelled me to break away, write my book, and I guess what brings us together here today.
Yeah, so you would identify. So what is something though more personal? Because I got the apathy part and the breakaway for that, but what is something personal about you that's not on a resume?
Well, I think apathy is incredibly personal because when you're the person who is responsible for creating these environments, right? When you lead tens of thousands of employees, ultimately you're accountable for the environment in which it operates. And it's a rude awakening when you wake up one day and you look around and the folks that you think have a lot of respect for you actually fear you. And then I had this epiphany that I was leading in a way that was not, it was not who I wanted to be. It wasn't the leader I wanted to be. And it wasn't creating the impact that I was hoping, although on a resume, you might see these fancy titles and the scope and the things that I was doing, but that apathy is incredibly personal to me because it compelled me to do things in a very different way, which has led to a level of fulfillment that I have never experienced until the last decade.
Great.
That's
well,
awesome.
Thank you for, I had to dig just a little deeper.
That's folks that are top line focused and don't realize that the bottom line is really what makes the difference. So that's a really good difference right there.
Yeah, man. And I'll tell you guys, for me, it was, I found myself being this command and control, bang my fist on the desk, results at all cost type leader, because that's what I was raised observing. That I didn't know any different. So my results were fantastic, but the question I never asked was at what cost? And that's kind of where I've dedicated the last decade of my career, is trying to get folks to see there is a better way. You don't have to lead the way that I led to get great results.
Nice. So next question is one about us getting to know you a little more. And it's one of we want to know who you are. What is the identity that represents character traits or behaviors of how others would describe you, or what you're aspiring to be? Like, what is it that you are doing that defines you as Kyle? I don't want to talk about a role, an industry, your schooling. We get into that later. So who are you as an individual?
And you're allowed to put
most
your
of my circle. What's that?
I said you're allowed to put your humility button on pause.
Well, that's kind of where I was going to go, actually, because I think my circle of friends and those that I interact with most often would lead with authenticity. And that's not always a good thing, because sometimes I say things that are a little too direct that people don't want to hear, but they can count on me to give the unbiased, well, as unbiased as possible, but to give them the real answers. Because for so many years, as you guys know, the higher you climb in the corporate world, people tell you things that you want to hear. So I've found this thread of authenticity in and outside the workplace. It's not just a workplace thing. I think authenticity, my humility, and ultimately I think most people in my circle and those that have any interaction with me know that I'm a guy that genuinely cares about others, about their growth and their development. And that's not a work thing. That's a personal thing.
Yeah, it's really great. And I liked what you said about the kindness piece. And so there's a way that we kind of think this through in that, oftentimes people misconfuse the word nice and kind. Kindness has a bit of niceness with it, but kindness is really telling the truth to people in a way in which they can hear it. And it's being
Amen. Well
authentic
said.
with them. And I love the way you identified that authenticity piece and and being bold to say things, but saying them in a way in which you can take care of the person who's listening to what you have to say.
I like to use the word diplomatic.
There you go.
Yes, there you go.
All right, so now let's learn about the roles you have. What are the hats that you wear, or so our audience can know, like those that corporate grind that you did. Tell us several of those spots along the way, and then get us to what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to it earlier, but like many of us, if not all of us, I started from very humble beginnings in a cubicle the size of a bathroom stall. You guys, it was just a tiny little space, but it felt like home. It was my first foray into the corporate world. It was for a regional bank here in Florida. And I managed to just kind of climb my way up the ladder. I said yes to a lot when others around me were like, no, that's a scary proposition. I don't want to be part of that. Or I would take on roles that had yet to be officially created. Because the organizations I was with, they would pilot different approaches and they had a need to try something before they would go much deeper with any one strategy. Ultimately, I found myself in a position where I was leading at one point 300-400 people, and there were some regulatory changes in the environment that I was in, which drove massive growth of the organization I was with. So no exaggeration, almost overnight, I went from leading 200-300 people to leading a few thousand people. And then that just continued on. And then ultimately, before I stepped away, I was leading the world's largest mail order pharmacy inside of a much bigger operation. I worked for a Fortune 10 pharmaceutical firm where I had about 14,000 employees. I had a $2 billion OPEX, a multi-billion dollar P&L that I led. And just prior to that, I guess for additional context, I led another organization of about 15,000 people where I led the Affordable Care Act and 1-800 Medicare telephonic enrollment operations. And that was about it's a $7 billion government-funded program that I'm really, really proud of the results that we managed to deliver. And by the way, that is the stop where, and I guess this will come full circle, that's the stop where I created these principles that I use as part of my business today. And it's also the foundation for my book, the USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestselling book, Begin With We, which has been out about 2.5 years now. And which ultimately is my purpose. This little book started off as a passion project for me. It turned into my purpose. So today, all of my time is spent on stage, kind of evangelizing these principles, working with organizations and their leadership teams to help transform their cultures into this, what I call a culture of excellence, which is really focused on doing away with this me, my, and I orientation and focusing much more broadly, but also overtly on the we, the collective power that a team can bring to the table.
Yeah, sounds really great. So I appreciate that, sharing, all of that with us and really talking about your characteristics. So now let's get into your experience. So your is something personal to you. It's doesn't have to be a mistake that was led by the corporation or have that, but it's like your personal What is your mistake or mishap that you're willing to share with us today?
When I was first approached to join this show, I was like, is it like a 3-hour show? How long do I have to talk about uh-ohs? And I say that with full transparency and vulnerability. If you had asked me that question, guys, 8 or 10 years ago, I would have, there are no uh-ohs. Everything's intentional. Everything works out because that's who I thought I had to be as a leader. But, I look back throughout those 30 years inside of the corporate world, and there's one example or one scenario that really sticks out that is kind of the foundation for, if I'm ever asked, what is the one bit of advice you would give someone? It's a result of the uh-oh that I experienced. So this was probably a decade ago. I was, so my boss, the fellow to whom I reported, moved on to another role outside of our organization. So my immediate supervisor role was open. I posted for it. And in the interim, while that fellow was gone, I was reporting to the president of the division. So I was, I got exposed to some things that I'd not seen before, and it really opened my eyes. And Meanwhile, as I had applied for this role, I was responsible for kind of 2 back office operations, a few thousand employees, and they weren't performing very well. They weren't. And although I felt as if I was the right guy for the role, I knew I had opportunities to be better. So I felt like I was in this kind of under this microscope. You applied for this role, you're reporting to the president of the division, your results aren't good. What do you have to do? You got to fix it. You got to clean things up. So I worked harder. I worked not smarter. I worked harder. And I never dug myself out. Well, I did ultimately, but not as quickly as I would have liked. I didn't get the job. And a week or 2 after the announcement for the new gentleman who took the role was made, Ted and I had a one-on-one. Ted was the president of the division. I said, Ted, I got to ask, can you give me some feedback? Why was I not given this opportunity to take this role? And he said, Kyle, your 2 shops, they're not running very well right now. I said, got it. No pushback from me. As a matter of fact, we had already discussed the Get Well plan, this plan that I put together to kind of get us out of the red. And he said, but you never asked for help. And I said, well, of course I didn't ask for help. I'm the senior executive over these 2 functions. It's my responsibility. The buck stops with me. I'm going to get this stuff cleaned up. He said, but you never asked for help. And I was not, my ego is the reason for that scenario being what it is. I didn't feel safe or comfortable raising my hand to ask for help because I was always raised to think this is your job. You get it fixed or you won't be here any longer. So that one piece of advice I give folks now is all from that scenario. It's like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Nobody expects you to do it alone. And if they do, you might be in the wrong environment. So for me, the massive uh-oh came a decade ago, and it was like, stop trying to be this champion, this knight in shining armor that has all the answers, standing on your perfection pedestal. Ask for help because there are people that want to help you.
Yeah, you're so true because, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. The sign of weakness is pretending that you know what you're doing when in fact you don't. And so, so really great that you were able to really think about that because I'm sure that has impacted your decision making and the way that you interact with individuals, understanding that, getting that help. Because really leaders have this myth that they have to do everything or they have to know everything. And so the opportunity is that it's more about the teachability of the individual leader that can help propel that individual forward more so than, really focusing on knowing all the answers and being able to pass a trivia test or something else.
What are some of the factors that led to that ego position that you had? Do you think it was gendered into your brain that's a male thing? Was it the way you were raised? Because there's a couple areas you can go down on this, but a lot of folks, as we have different generationals that are in the workforce now, some seem like they ask for help way too soon before trying something out, and then we have the flip side where we never ask for it ever. So, where do you think what led to that ego side of things for you?
You used the word, man. It's generational. I am convinced there's this, I think leadership paradigms on the macro, they I don't think evolve is the right word. They change. So I was raised in a corporate setting where my boss would scream. My bosses would bang their fists on the desk, and they ruled and led by fear rather than inspiration and motivation. So, and this happens in every organization. You guys know this, right? So if you want to be considered for a new position, right? You applied to take on some position of authority. We almost inherently start to adopt the behaviors that we have historically loathed because we know the hiring manager is the person who has exhibited those behaviors, but we also know they control our ability to make more money, take on more things. So in my case anyway, I observed that behavior and I recognized that was the behavior that had put others in positions that I ultimately wanted to be in. So I led similarly. And I never asked the right questions like, is there a better way? Or am I having the impact that I set out to have when I first entered the workforce? I was really always asking, what's in it for me? What can I take on? What can I do more of? How do I get that fancy title in the cool corner office? So for me, I was a product of my environment, which I would venture to say is probably more often the case than any other outside or circumstantial situation. I think we all observe what's around us. And like it or not, there's this sheep mentality inside of the corporate world that says for me to do what I need to do, I should mirror the behavior that I've seen, good, bad, or otherwise. And it's a cycle that I am committed to breaking now, candidly.
Yeah. So, and what did you think that, so from your experience of not asking for help, what did it cost you in the way of either time, resources, reputation, whatever? Like what would you identify as your costs?
Well, the first thing is it cost me that job, because Ted was pretty clear. Had I been a little more open and vulnerable to the kind of the warts that were persisting inside of my organizations, I would have probably gotten the role. Aside from that, I alluded to it earlier, but I'll be a little more specific. So I had this epiphany moment probably 8 or 10 years ago when I realized, I was doing okay on the compensation side. I had these fancy titles. I had massive organizations that I was leading, but I was just so hollow and apathetic inside that it changed. It forced me to change. So the story that I'm speaking of is when I had this epiphany and I realized I wasn't having the impact and I wasn't fulfilled any longer and was so apathetic, I started to reach out to folks that I thought were my confidants. I had a handful of people that had worked with me for 10 or more years. And what I learned was, although I thought they had a lot of respect for me, they only feared me. And that's a tough pill to swallow. So I think
Did
it
they
cost
ever,
me relationships.
did they actually say that they feared you in the conversation, or
No,
did you just sense that they feared you?
I pulled that out from them. And by the way, I'm a big fan of surveys. So I would also do once or twice a year, depending on the organization, I would do 360 feedback surveys to try to learn, am I what I think I am, or am I portraying the leadership persona that I want to portray? And that was also a rude awakening, probably about 10 years ago when I realized that, I'm not the leader I thought I was, although the results were good.
And when you were reaching out to these individuals, it was a one-on-one scenario, or were they together in a group when you were asking the questions about, feedback for you?
I've done both actually, but this epiphany moment was immediately after those one-on-ones. They were in a one-on-one environment, which is what prompted me to start doing the anonymous surveys thereafter.
Yeah, really excellent. Because if you truly want to know what people think, you have to ask them one-on-one. Because in a group, people will hide behind an answer.
Oh
They'll
yeah.
give you the sugar-coated answer. Having
Oh yeah.
led large groups myself of individuals within multi-billion-dollar organizations, it is really important, especially because people see your position. And although whether they may fear the position or not, so you can kind of think about that, they do. Your voice carries a lot of weight, right? So when you say something, people are really listening to what it is that you have to say. So what was it that gave you, so you heard the information, but how did it trigger this information that said, oh my gosh, people are fearing me now? It's not that there's something else, it's this that got you into that understanding of where the apathy was. So can you identify something that triggered that?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. So, fellas, I was on the doorstep of a divorce that ultimately happened. My health was not where it had been the previous couple of decades. So between poor health, my relationship with, my best friend was deteriorating at a rapid rate. And that was largely, by the way, because of my work life. I was on the road 3-4 nights a week for more than a dozen years. And I started to prioritize things inappropriately, and it cost me a marriage, among other things. So it got so bad, and the apathy was so palpable, I stepped away. And let me just give this caveat, because I recognize members of your audience might hear this part of my story and say, well, I'm not that, and I can't do that. I recognize I was in a very fortunate position. The apathy was so strong, I made a decision to step away. I didn't know what I was going to do next or where I was going to go, but I knew I had a couple of bucks in the bank and I could sit on the bench for a month, maybe two. And I'd made myself a promise. When I go back, not if, because I needed to pay the bills, when I go back into the corporate world, I was going to lead in a way that I'd never led. So I was going to be very selective about my next stop. What organization was I going to land in? And is that organization, and more specifically, the person to whom I was going to report, would they allow me to lead in a way that I had never led? Would they allow me to be the leader I always wanted to be? And I landed a role that seemed like it would check those boxes. And I was in this role about 60 days, and I made the decision to bring the top 40 or 50 leaders in this massive organization together. We all met in Lawrence, Kansas, and the night before I was to address this group of leaders, I was terrified because I had the script for the old way that I had led historically, but I knew if I wanted to change and transform my own internal kind of dialogue and internal feelings about what I do for a living, I I had to do something differently. And that was the night that this epiphany struck, and I created the principles that ultimately resulted in the book and so on. So I would say the openness to change came when I realized I was at the end of the road with the old approach, and it left me feeling a way that I didn't like any longer. I didn't like who I'd become in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So this gave me an opportunity to lead differently, and it worked. The transformation inside of this organization is nothing short of profound, but more importantly, I watched bosses transform into leaders, people that genuinely give a shit about those around them and not just the results they can deliver, which just inspires me and fueled me to go further.
And I know, and Ben's going to say something here in a minute, but just to follow up on, like, it's really important to just take a moment here and listen in to, like, what happened for you, that people can really think about, oh my gosh, this could really be happening for me too.
Mm-hmm.
It's having that moment of self-awareness so that I can actually make a change, that I can be who I want to be, because it's based on the choices that I'm going to make, not the circumstances. Like, you made a choice to consciously lead in a different way, not circumstantial by saying, well, that's just the way it's been all along.
Yes.
And really opening up your space and opening up your mind to what it is that you wanted to make sure that you were identifying yourself to be. Like, you really started no longer thinking about the role you played, but you started thinking about the identity of who you are. And that's the message that's so important for people to understand, whether they physically lead a number of people or whether they're just leaders within their individual contributing role that they have, is to really gain and understand the difference between putting some emphasis on, oh, this is my job and my job title, but no, this is the person I want to be. This is who I want to show up in the world.
So powerful, man. Please, I need to piggyback on that, because so powerful what you just said, because there's a part two to that. The transformation I experienced started in the workplace. It's like, okay, you aspire to be this. You want to be this inspirational leader that is known for motivating, inspiring those around you, not just getting results out of them, right? Which required me to lead differently. But I never anticipated it would bleed into my personal life. So I established these principles for myself in the workplace, but then I found myself being a hypocrite outside of the workplace, not being the same person. So I think the ultimate story here that I am most proud of is, I recognize self-reflection, massive, absolutely massive. I think it's almost number one, if not the number one characteristic of a really impactful leader. They can be open and vulnerable about what they're good at, what they're not good at, their blind spots and those things. That self-reflection led to a change in my work life, which ultimately has led to a change that I have a hard time describing how profound it's been in my personal life. And I think that's where you guys realize, like, so many of us, we have two vocabularies. We have our work vocabulary. Unless you guys go home and ask your significant other, how'd you do on those deliverables today? Or let's put a pin on that and we'll circle back to the parking lot to answer your questions. That level of inauthenticity to me inside the workplace felt natural. And then I realized, gosh, man, you're kind of a hypocrite. And now the way I conduct myself inside the workplace, with some exception, obviously, is nearly identical to the guy you would meet on the street outside of the workplace.
Wow. There's so many things there. And the self-reflection piece was actually the statement I was about to start saying, that we've had a resounding theme with guests upon guests upon guests of what thinking about the allowed them to do is get to that point of self-reflection, and how much that makes a difference on leadership and the growth that they have. And here's where I actually want to fully interject our definition of what being a cohesive leader means. A cohesive leader is someone who includes the thoughts and ideas of others, performs meaningful work, and collaborates with the spirit of need and trust. And it sounds like there was a transition on your realm with the idea of we, which is cohesion, which is belonging, value, and trust. That those principles then became guiding forces into what you became, because it's all going to be there. I totally believe that we have to be, and that, well, I'm pausing to say, even why we start the introduction of knowing the character traits, the identity piece, that's the piece that matters most. They're not going to remember your titles. They're going to remember how you made them feel. They're going to remember all these other things. And that's what they go to bat for. They go to bat for the caring guy, the energetic one, the passionate one, not the director of whatever, right? So they don't remember that title. They remember those other things. Those are the intangibles that will last longer.
Well said. Totally
Yeah.
agree.
And I really love it. There's a couple of other things too to kind of make some clarity around, and that is when you're transparent, it's where you share things. So, like you were transparent in that you shared, but you became vulnerable when you started sharing the emotional impact that it had
Mm.
for you. And that's
Mm.
sometimes what where leaders or individuals who are aspiring to lead, it's where they miss out on the fact that they think just by telling somebody something, I'm being fully transparent, and that's good. And we sometimes in corporate world, because I have a strong corporate background as well, is that we say, oh, we have to be transparent, but vulnerability is what individuals want. They want to know the emotional connection that you have with whatever transparency you're going to share. How does it impact? And what you've really done is a masterclass so far in Goleman's emotional intelligence and really centering in on the most important one, which is your self-awareness, and then having your ability to have self-correction or self-regard, where you can then figure out, how do I control what I'm doing, what I'm feeling in a way that still allows me to be authentic and to be genuine, and still get others involved and get them to participate in what we need to do. And I don't have to make them fear me to be able to do it. We can do it through what we refer to as cohesion, where people feel included, where they feel they have meaningful work, and where they feel that they can have mutual commitments, which they do through collaboration.
Amen. Really well said. That's why when we kicked off and you guys welcomed me to the show, you're doing such important work. It's my honor to be here. So I thank you for the opportunity again, because I think we're so aligned on this approach.
There was so we talked about the cost of that and you made the changes with this new, where you got to reinvent yourself. You came out with the principles. How then? What was the transition phase that made you want to leave the corporate world, then to start your own thing, to actually take this further? Like, what? So that helped you prevent going back that other way, because you're gonna, now it's all be you. Like, now you have to live the authenticity with your own business. What was that transition phase like for you?
In a word, difficult. So I started this. I shared the first part of that story where I created these principles and shared them with this 50 or 60 person leadership team. And I established my going in premise for these principles was these are my expectations of behavior among the team. But they're also, and probably even before that, I want them to be your expectations for me. And one of the principles, one of my favorites, is we challenge each other, which is followed by we embrace challenge. And boy, did I faced it, because for some context, my direct reports, I think I had 6 or 7 at the time. Their average tenure in the roles they were in was approaching a dozen years. They had forgotten more about the roles that they were in than I knew at that point when I first joined the organization. And they had seen other people with shiny shoes and starch shirt and these really, a stellar resume and this, pedigree that these guys and gals had come and gone. As a matter of fact, the person who had the role before me was dismissed. And I believe the woman before him was also dismissed. I'm not certain about that. So they had seen guys like me come and go, and they had seen different approaches. And it left them, in many cases, sour. So many of this leadership team, I shouldn't say many, I would say about a quarter of the leadership team of these 40, 50, 60 people, they were difficult to me. And I recognized pretty early on after introducing these principles, if I wanted to be seen as anything other than a hypocrite, I had to take my own medicine. So as they challenged me, either intentionally or just through the course of regular business, because there were people that would challenge just because they could, and they wanted to prove a point, and they wanted to show that the new guy didn't know everything he thought he knew. He wasn't as special as he might pretend that he thinks he is. So I found myself in a position where historically I would have said, because I said so, or, well, this is just where we're going because I know better. And this change and this transformation required me to say more. Well, why do you have that opinion? Let's talk deeper. Let's look into your suggestion or your idea, rather than just saying, here's the path we're heading. The first 6-8 months was incredibly difficult. I'm happy to say years later, the 10 We's are still this company's corporate cultural manifesto. It's on their annual appraisals. They have the 10 We Awards. And now they're just one of many firms that have kind of adopted that approach. The thing that kind of pushed me over the edge to leave the corporate world and do my own thing was, so I left the organization that I was just sharing the background on, went to another, took the principles there as well, had an okay run, not as profound as the run before. And members from the old team started to call and say, when's this book coming out? And I'd never discussed writing a book ever with them or anybody. And they said, you've got something here that's changed who we are, changed this organization. Are you about it? Or is this just something that it's a passing fad for you? So they kind of challenged me to put my money where my mouth is. And that's what resulted in breaking away, writing the book, and doing what I do today. I owe it to them.
Yeah, it's really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So one of the questions that we always like to ask is, what was a question you thought we were going to ask you that we didn't?
I thought we might, you might ask for number 2, and then it might get really ugly.
We'll do a second interview. We'll do another one in a future. There's a couple folks we'll do that with, so that'd be awesome.
Really great.
Yeah.
I've got to ask. So the audience here, what are the 10 principles?
Yeah, I'll fly through them because usually this could be a much longer dialogue. But and I can't list these principles without 2 things. First is a caveat, that is they are incredibly simple, but simple is not easy. We all know that. We know how to lose weight. Got to take in fewer calories and burn more. It's simple, but it ain't easy.
If it were
right, it ain't easy.
If it were that easy, you wouldn't need us, right? It's exactly right. So so sharing these are not going to stop people from wanting to connect with you. So we love the fact that you're going to share them.
And then the second caveat is related to something I mentioned earlier. As I walk through these, I would encourage your audience to think not just through their corporate or business lens. If I were to embrace any one of these principles, would I be better off for it in my personal life? Would my friends, family, my loved ones, would they see a change in me? And would I see a change in myself? That's a favor that I ask when I introduce these. Okay, the 10 We's, they build upon one another. And when they're in isolation, probably not super helpful. But when you have this group of 10, they create a cultural currency by which we all have the same ability to spend. The first is the most fundamental, and it's something that will never escape. We do the right thing, always. And I never leave out that one word second sentence, always. We can argue, disagree, we can go back and forth and arm wrestle over what the right thing is. And in the book, I walk the reader through a decision tree that might be helpful to some. But we're going to do the right thing. And we may stumble doing the right thing, but we'll never enter a conversation thinking about the quickest path through or even the cheapest, because a lot of times it's not the fastest solution and sometimes it costs more. But if we're going to do the right thing, as a leader or a member of a team, the number one way to demonstrate my commitment to doing the right thing is number 2. We lead by example. The question is not, should I lead by example? You already are. We're leading by example every single day, every interaction. If you want to establish this culture of excellence that I aim to set out to create back in my days, but also work with others today, we must set an example that others follow. People don't listen to your words. They watch your actions. And I think leading by example is a really important component of the 10 We's. But if I want to lead by example, so how do I do that? I got to be known for making good on my commitments. First, behind the curtain. We've all been in that scenario where someone on the team has been tasked with doing something that you need or we need to take forward somewhere else. They drop the ball and this whole series of dominoes starts to fall. So number 3 is we measure ourselves. Number 3 is we say what we're going to do and then we do it. It's that simple. If we're going to do these things that we say we're going to do, we got to do what? We got to take action. Number 4 is we take action. Every organization, every team has things not going well. They have a gnarly problem in the corner. Maybe they have a turnaround time or an SLA that is underperforming, and they have the solution, but they don't want to throw their hand up because they're just going to be greeted with more work and usually no more money. But in a culture of excellence, we don't sleep on things that aren't going well. We point them out. We take action. But to take action and to encourage others to take action, we've got to be prepared for things not to go well. Number 5 is we own our mistakes. I think you guys would agree, most people don't judge folks by their mistakes. We judge them by how quickly they remedy the mistake and if it happens again. And we can't approach fixing things and growing from our mistakes if they're hidden. So we must own our mistakes. Now, no one's going to own their mistake if they don't know that number 6 is something we're all practicing. So we pick each other up. Whether it's someone struggling inside the workplace or maybe they've got a sick kid at home, an ailing parent, whatever the scenario is, we all bring baggage to work and we must commit. If we're going to be a team and we're chasing excellence, we must commit to taking care of each other. We must pick each other up. That's not reserved just for the leader. The peers pick up peers. Peers pick up the leader. We're all humans. We all have baggage. We all need help. When we move on from picking each other up, it becomes a little more difficult and a little more tougher in some environments. Number 7 is we measure ourselves by outcomes, not activity. Throughout my run, and I would venture to guess many of your audience and maybe you guys as well, we've fallen in love with busyness. My calendar was packed. I was triple booked 3 times yesterday. And those are all important activities. But I challenge folks that I work with today, if you can't draw a straight line from this maniacal meeting schedule that you have to the series of commitments and deliverables that you've been assigned or that come with your role, it should be scrutinized. Why am I doing it? And I think when we walk through those exercises, we see people engaged in so much activity, but they're not really driving the outcomes that the customer pays for. And that's how the real world works. We're judged by our outcomes. Number 8 is it's my favorite. It's we challenge each other because, as you know, historically challenges usually flow one direction. And it's not enough for us to say, well, we got to open the door for the team to challenge the leader. I also want our teams to challenge each other inside of the team, peer to peer. There's a one-word second sentence I never leave off of this one as well. It's diplomatically. We challenge each other diplomatically. And with this principle, more than any, I've seen teams get out of their sandboxes and get rid of the silo mentality and say, well, how can I help you? How can I help you? Because more often than not, they've heard through the grapevine, through their employees, they understand the challenges other leaders and other parts of the organization and even inside the team are facing. So when we challenge each other, nothing's off limits. Challenges must be grounded, though, in data or experience. It can't be your opinion because that's when we really get the slippery slope because everybody has one. But if you bring data and or experience to the table with your challenge, we are obligated to live out number 9, and that's we embrace challenge. Again, whether it's market forces, whether it's an internal issue, whether it's a competitive threat, whether it's tariffs, we're going to look every single one of these challenges in the eye. We're going to lock arms and we're going to say, let's go. We're going to be galvanized by them. We're not going to run from them. And then the last principle is number 10. It's we obsess over details. I was intentional to leave this as number 10 because I think it's a recipe for disaster any earlier in the list. This is the icing on the cake. In most environments, most industries, most companies, individually, what separates good from great and great from world-class is our obsession with details. It's how much we care about the customer's interaction, their experience, how much we care about our team members and their experience, their engagement. How much energy and effort we put into the things that our customers will see and feel. And my favorite example is packaging. And it's not applicable to every industry and every one of our roles. It's not applicable to my role, but look at it this way. How many times have you gotten a package, an iPhone, for example? When you open any product from Apple, it's packaged in such a way that it almost guarantees excitement for the product that's inside. It's like, if they go through this much care to put this tape so precisely with that little green arrow, and the unboxing experience is really special. Now, when you juxtapose that or compare it to, say, IKEA or any number of products you buy from Amazon, if it even has a manual inside of it, is the grammar right? Is the punctuation, spelling right? Almost every product I've ever gotten that's not from a massive organization, you could tell that they didn't sweat those details. And I think that is how customers and our clients, they judge us based on our connection with the details that matter most to them. Those are the 10 We's.
Awesome. And we are so grateful that you were able to share that and even very succinctly here in the last 5 minutes to really give it, because it's really powerful information. And I think the things that you said today that we can kind of just recap a little bit on, one of them is don't be afraid to ask for help because we can all use help. Decide who you want to be as a person and take that as a choice that you want to make, not the circumstance that you want to be stuck in. You talked about the successes or failures you have. We subscribe to a theory that says that it's not the successes or failures that shape your life, but it's actually how you handle them that really makes a difference. And then you really also made sure that we knew how that you would integrate this philosophy, not only in your work environment, but also in your personal life, and understanding that you had to be held to the same high standard personally as you would be corporately. I think very valuable information. So we cannot thank you enough for, really bringing some good quality mastermind class, together. And so we like to end all of our Cohesion Culture programs and our Cohesive Leader programs with this simple mantra. You don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.